Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. We have quite a bit to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. We have Joe Biden's plummet nationwide, and I want to talk about specifically the actual implications that has on Texas politics. So if he does tank, if he's still on the ballot, what does that do in Texas? We have a massive amount of local elected officials and party leaders coming together in House District 98, Giovanni Capriglione's district, calling on him to actually take a position on banning and ending the practice of Democrat chairmanships. We're going to talk about the brutal murder of a 12-year-old girl in Houston by two illegal immigrants and just the details around that situation. We're going to try to handle that judiciously and charitably, maybe not charitably, but carefully is maybe the word I would use. So we're going to carefully tread on some of those details. But there is quite a bit to cover that is specific to what the heck is going on in Texas. So let's get to the show. Joe Biden is tanking nationwide. And the reality is that anybody who watched the debate knows that Joe Biden had an abysmal performance, and the Democrats are truly at a crossroads and not knowing exactly what to do. Do they get rid of Biden? If they do get rid of him, do they literally forfeit having a presidential candidate on states like Wisconsin, Nevada, Ohio? If they tried to replace him with anybody other than Kamala, they wouldn't even have their candidate on the ballot, which would essentially cede those states to Republicans. Imagine Trump just knowing at the start of the night, no matter what I do, Nevada, Wisconsin, Ohio are coming my way. It definitely narrows Democrats' path to keep the presidency. If they keep Kamala, she might be more unliked than Biden, especially the more time the camera spends on her and the more she talks in the very strangely construed sentences that she often speaks in. But the reality is that no matter what happens, there could be a widening of the ticket. It seems like there is a better path to Republicans having a wider margin of victory. So what does that imply? How does that affect Texas, right? Because you can listen to any of the pundits out there, go to any of your national shows that a lot of you consume, and they're going to talk about Biden's performance, the national polls, and all of this stuff. I want to focus on what it means for Texas. So there are a couple things it does. First and foremost, it definitely hurts Colin Allred's fundraising, okay? Significantly. Colin Allred has a path to, $50 to $100 million, which is a massive amount of money nationally that they could spend on a U.S. Senate race in Texas. But in order to access that money, donors have to believe that there's some path to victory for Colin. Now, he has a pretty thin path as long as Ted Cruz continues to run a serious campaign, which he is. But if Donald Trump is going to, instead of winning Texas by 6 points, win it by 9 or 10 or 11 points, then the reality is it kind of closes any path that Colin would have. And it makes it much harder for him to now justify, or for, let's say, national donors to justify spending another $25 to $50 million in Texas. So instead of spending $100 million or $75 million or $60 million, they spend $25. Now, what does that do if they do that? What does it do if they spend 12? Okay, that's the question. 15. Now, you might think, wow, Luke, that's not very serious. But the reality is it is a pretty serious amount of money that you could lose that Beto O'Rourke had. Remember, Beto O'Rourke ran just this massive campaign that took off, and this money just completely poured in from all across the nation. And there was excitement around the idea that he could beat Ted Cruz, and he lost by 2 points. If in September and October, national Democrats feel like, oh my gosh, we might lose Montana, we might lose Ohio, we're not sure about Nevada, we need to win Arizona, they're not going to flood a ton more dollars into Texas. Beto O'Rourke's victory is what also had implications down the ballot. So Beto O'Rourke, when I say his victory, his 2-point loss was a victory for Texas Democrats because it was the most anybody had gotten, the closest anybody had gotten to win statewide in a very long time. And so what happened that same year is that a ton of Republicans lost in Tarrant County, in Dallas County, in Harris County. There was a wave of victories that Democrats had. So the top of the ticket carries the rest of the people across the finish line. In the event that Biden is going to win a district by 2 points, you now stand a better chance of a Democrat holding on. So when Biden drops, and then Colin Allred, who's already going to have a hard time outperforming Biden, now has an even harder time getting the money, you have a lot less spent in those final 2 months. Now, this hasn't happened, right? I'm not telling you to prepare for a walk in the park in November, but I am telling you that there's a likelihood, if the dominoes fall in such a way, that Allred is also a victim of the Biden plummet nationwide and the significant drop we'll see in Texas. And if they do replace him, that person might not be much better, and then you might be stuck in the same situation. Democrats might still be on defense instead of offense, so they're not coming to Texas with an extra $25 to $50 million spent in the last 2 months. Will it happen? I don't know. And if we have to assume they're going to, you want to run like you're going to lose. During the runoffs, conservatives all across the state were focusing on winning a lot of these races, which we did. Not only the school choice races, but also Andy Hopper defeating Lynn Stuckey, David Lowe defeating Stephanie Click, AJ Louderback defeating Jeff Bachnight in races that, Texans for Lawsuit Reform was dumping $750,000, right? And honestly, even Governor Abbott was against us on all three of those. So conservatives are getting together. We're all making these plans and talking about all the important things, how to win these races. And you would end up in these conversations or meetings where different people would say, well, look, I think we're going to win those races. I really think those incumbents are on defense too much. And I tell everybody, the best way to lose a race is to think you're going to win a race in politics. It's just 100% the case every single time. So I'm not telling you to prepare for an easy walk in the park in November in Texas, but I am telling you that if these national trends continue, Texas Democrats are going to be victims of that. Now, then the question is, it's not just the U.S. Senate race. A lot of us care about Texas. So what does it mean for Texas? Well, you have the Adam Hinojosa-La Mantilla seat in South Texas. And I want you to remember that he only lost by 600 votes of almost 200,000 that were cast. It was so many votes. I can't even remember how many. Off the top of my head, I can't even remember exactly how many votes were cast in that election. But I'm telling you, it was a ton. And it was a 600 vote margin, right? So the Democrats held on to this South Texas Senate seat by, if 301 people make a different decision, they have a different election result, right? That's a pretty big deal. And so in the last election, 88,037 people voted for Morgan LaMantilla and 87,378 people voted for the Republican Adam Hinojosa. And this race starts in the Corpus Christi area and goes down to Cameron County. 175,000 votes. I now have the number because while I was talking, I was looking it up. 175,415 votes. So the implication for Democrats is that all of a sudden districts that they barely held on to, if Trump does a lot better and Democrats are having trouble raising money at the end in Texas, you could see seats like that move Republican if we take those races seriously. Now, what I'm going to do is I actually want to give y'all the numbers between Abbott and Beto O'Rourke in some of the state House districts that are competitive in the general election. Because you can see that if Trump does better and Ted Cruz does better, these are the type of margins and races that could be affected, okay? So Mark LaHood beat Steve Allison in March. This is Joe Straus's old district. Greg Abbott got 51.1% of the vote in that district. Beto O'Rourke got 47.4% of the district. So if Trump does well, he maintains numbers like that, there's really not a path to a Democrat flipping. People are not going to vote for Donald Trump and then cross over and vote for a Democrat instead, right? For state house. Caroline Harris in Williamson County, 52.5% for Abbott, 45.8% for O'Rourke. She's probably in a much safer situation if these national trends are continuing. You would worry if the suburban shift was pretty significant and Biden and Trump were tighter in Texas, you could have a problem there. House District 118 here in Bexar County, John Lujan. Abbott got 48.5% of the vote. Beto O'Rourke got 50% of the vote. That is a district that a Republican state representative is currently holding, where he won it by, I think, like 800 to 1,000 votes. And Greg Abbott actually lost it by 400 or 500 votes. So you have, like, I don't know, 1,000 people in that district that are voting for Beto O'Rourke and their Republican John Lujan. So these are kind of that South Texas Hispanic Tejano who's been here, multi-generational, that's in the process of moving over to the Republican Party, but it is a process. Janie Lopez down in the Valley, Abbott won 51.1% of the vote in her district to O'Rourke's 47.7%. Angie Chen Button, Abbott won 50.6% to O'Rourke's 48%. These type of districts are much safer if these national trends continue, okay, where Democrats would hope to unseat some of these Republican incumbents. And then you look at seats that Republicans could flip, starting with the Tracy King seat in Uvalde. Abbott won 51.9% of the vote to O'Rourke's 46% of the vote. So that race is where Don McLaughlin is the nominee. Don McLaughlin has signed the contract with Texas. Don McLaughlin signed the letter that said no Democrat chairs and no speaker who's going to appoint Democrat chairs. So he's a real solid Republican. And he could flip that seat. Huge win. Eddie Morales' district, Abbott won 48.7% of the vote to O'Rourke's 49.5%. All of a sudden you have this district in the Valley where if Trump's doing better, remember, Trump outperformed Cornyn in some of those South Texas counties when he was on the ballot last time. So you do see this South Texas Hispanic shift is Republican, but it's also very pro-Trump. It's very pro-Trump's brand of Republicanism. Remember, the Mitt Romneys and the McCains and the Bushes, they tried all the time. We're going to win the Hispanic vote. None of them did as well as Donald Trump is doing with these Hispanic voters. He is helping move these people significantly towards the Republican Party. House District 34, which is in the Corpus Christi area. This is formerly Abel Herrera's seat. He is stepping down. It is an open seat now. Denise Villalobos is the Republican running. Abbott got 47% of the vote, and O'Rourke got 51.7% of the vote. So that's a district that you would think has a little bit of a margin. And if Biden wins that district by 4 or 5 points, you're probably not going to see a Republican state representative out of the district. But if the South Texas shift were to continue, and if Biden's pulling the ticket down even more, you could see Trump pull a district like that off by 0.3 of a percentage point. Maybe there is a 4 or 5 point swing. And if there is a 4 or 5 point swing there, then maybe the Republican all of a sudden does kind of ride that wave into the legislature. House District 70 is Representative Plaza's district, and this is the only blue district in Collin County. So the Collin County Republican state representatives, when they redistricted, had an option to make this district more competitive than it is, okay? But honestly, they chose, and a lot of people chose this, to make their seats more Republican, because some of these guys like Shaheen and Leach and stuff had to raise a ton of money and spend a ton of money in the general election to keep their seats. So, and this was kind of a Republican decision overall, was we're going to shore up our districts so we don't have to spend money keeping us in office, and we're also not going to make as many competitive districts. So the kind of swing districts got more red, and then districts like this one that could have been maybe a little closer weren't. But here's the numbers. Abbott got 45.9% of the vote in that district. Beto O'Rourke got 52.8%. That is in the Collin County area. Now, when I look at these districts, I like Steve Kennard. I think he has a harder time winning than the other three. And it's not just because of the margin being a, 6.8, 6.9% district. It's that Trump's increase in ballot is coming from a better performance with black voters and a better performance with Hispanic voters, not necessarily a better performance with white suburban voters. Now, that could change, and he could start to eat into that. But it's actually who he's gaining with that will determine which districts move, right? The other three districts I'm talking about are all in South Texas. So they're part of this kind of South Texas transition to the Republican Party. This district is in the heart of an upper middle class white, college-educated, New York Times subscribing district. So it's harder to move. But these people still have been Republicans in the past, do care about issues like public safety and border security and things like that, so they could move. And I think Steve Kennard is also in a position and needs to work hard to keep himself in a position to be able to potentially ride that wave.
News and analysis on what's happening in Texas. End your day with daily headlines from Texas Scorecard. Every day at 5 p.m., join me, Brandon Waltons, as we recap the biggest stories of the day and talk about why they matter to you. From the state capitol to town hall, there's no shortage of events happening. Keep up with it all. Watch and subscribe to Daily Headlines from Texas Scorecard.
And one of the things I think could wake up a lot of these white suburban voters are the horrific stories that are unfortunately coming out, like the murder of Jocelyn Nungaray. And if you have kids that are listening, you're in the car or whatever, just you could skip the next 4 or 5 minutes. I'm not going to get into graphic detail, just to let you know, but we are talking about a horrific crime committed on a 12-year-old girl. Jocelyn Nungaray, it's now been confirmed that she was sexually assaulted prior to being murdered by Johan Jose Martinez Rangel and Franklin Peña Ramos. 2 illegal immigrants. We also know that this puts the death penalty on the table to be considered. I was actually very appreciative that Governor Abbott tweeted out, "Time for the death penalty for these 2 monsters." And I've talked about the death penalty on this show a little bit, but I think it's worth reminding everybody that the Texas Senate has protected what little we have of the death penalty in Texas. The Texas House with Jeff Leach and Joe Moody have worked very hard, and Dade Phelan, to undermine and overturn the death penalty. Speaker Phelan created a committee chaired by Joe Moody, who is a Democrat, and then ran all the death penalty reform through that committee. So they actually, literally gives the Democrats this like clear path to gutting the death penalty. And they wanted to basically say, if anybody says they're bipolar, you can't give them the death penalty. Okay. That was like the original bill that Joe Moody passed. Which, by the way, if you're somebody who's at a state in your life where you are willing to rape and murder a 12-year-old girl with your friend, the demonic possession and mental anguish that you are in is such that there is no way somebody would not say you are bipolar, you are schizophrenic, you are a myriad of other mental illnesses. And so Joe Moody tried to pass a bill that was, and with Jeff Leach, that basically was just, hey, as long as you're one of those, no death penalty, right? So I'm very appreciative that Governor Abbott comes out and says, no, these are monsters and they need the death penalty. There will be a process of a jury of these people's peers reviewing the evidence and making a determination. That is how the justice system works. I tweeted out in response to Governor Abbott's statement, the death penalty is a vital tool that was given to the state for such a time as this. And for those of you who are Christians, you should know that, Scripture is clear that God has given the state the sword, right? You as a citizen don't have the sword. The church does not have the sword, right? So God didn't give the ability for the deacons and elders of my church to come together and say death penalty for Joe, right? And we've decided, no, he's formed the state for that. And the state has been given the sword. The way the state would yield the sword in a prudent and wise manner that would reflect why they were given it would be little deaths for the sake of preventing larger death, right? And that's kind of the lens by which the state views these things. I'm not saying every judge and juror and everybody understands this fully, but that is the theological realities behind why we have it, why the state was given it. One of the things I said in my tweet, I said, sadly in Texas, even after they receive the death penalty, it might take decades to deliver justice. And that is an unfortunate reality of our system and how it's set up. But the good news is that people are recognizing how horrific this is and that it needs to be handled. We had another murder up in Chick-fil-A in Irving that an illegal immigrant committed just days after this. It's horrific and horrendous. And that's why you heard President Trump, if any of y'all watched the debate or listened to it, like he constantly talked about this story and others. This is what's happening when you literally open your border up to over 10 million people to walk across. As this becomes a constant discussion, I do believe that even districts like the one HD70 in Collin County, I think you will see more and more of those upper middle class suburban voters go, you know what? I actually do care about public safety. I actually do care about the state of our society and community and the dangers that exist with an open border. And so, again, it's not just the national race that will be affected. It's not just the U.S. Senate race that will be affected, but it could be these down ballot races, which would give us even more Republicans. And that is a great segue into the letter that was sent to Giovanni Capriglione this week. Because we all want, when I say we all, I think everybody listening and watching this, I think the donors, the activists, the party leaders, the elected officials, the staff, everybody wants to go after Democrats. Okay? That is our goal. And that's what we should be united behind, not only in November, but also during the session. And you know what's funny is conservatives constantly get this criticism. Well, y'all need to spend your time attacking Democrats and not Republicans. Okay? Here is how it works. Let me explain this. The conservative side of the GOP looks at the Democrats, takes aim at the Democrats, and pulls the trigger. Okay, metaphorically speaking. Let me clarify that. Between you, me, and the NSA who are listening in on this, metaphorically speaking, pulls the trigger. Okay, so we're ready to attack Democrats. And then these Republicans like dive in front of them, take the bullet, and then try to gaslight us and go, I can't believe you're not shooting at Democrats. Let me give an example. You say, hey, there's a bunch of Democrats that have a bunch of power that they shouldn't have, and they use that power to pass their legislation, to punish conservatives, to have leverage over Republicans to keep them in line. I don't like that. I want to go after Democrats. So you load, you aim, fire. Okay? That's how it works. Let's hurt Democrats politically, take away their positions so they can't attack conservative policy and use their leverage and power to help their agenda. That's the goal. But these Republicans stand in their way and go, no, we want Democrats to have this power. They take the bullets and then they get mad at us. That's how it works. And then they turn around and tell you, why won't you shoot at Democrats? So let's read this letter that was sent to Giovanni Capriglione. And this is from people in his district. Dear Representative Capriglione, as Tarrant County Republicans, we know firsthand how important it is to elect strong Republican leaders who will fight for our values and stop Democrats from wielding influence over our state. We are asking you to make it clear to your constituents that you will oppose any candidate for Speaker of the Texas House who supports appointing Democrat committee chairs. We are also asking for you to commit to electing a Republican Speaker of the House through a Republican caucus election and opposing any candidate who first courts the support of Democrats. We believe these commitments are necessary to ensure that any future Speaker of the Texas House represents and is accountable to the Republican majority and its principles. We look forward to your reply. Now, that's a great letter. Now, was this sent by one person, two people, three people in his district? No. Some of y'all don't know, Giovanni represents a portion of northeast Tarrant County, which are cities like Keller, Southlake, Colleyville, Grapevine. That is his district, okay? Some of these names you might not know, but what I will tell you on the outset before I go through some of this is that these are some of the most influential political figures in his community, okay? Lee Wamsgans. She's the founder of Southlake Families, who put the letter out. She's also very active and a leader in Patriot Mobile, which I know many of you use as your mobile service provider. There is a ton of other people, like just general activists on Southlake Families who have helped turn around their school board. About, I think, 75% of the precinct chairs in his district. I think there's like, I don't know, 40 or 50 and like 30 something signed it. I didn't count the exact number, but I'm just telling you, like 75% of the Republican precinct chairs in this district all signed this letter. You then have the mayor of Southlake, the mayor pro tem of Southlake, I don't know, 3 city councilmen in Southlake. You have the entire Southlake Carroll School Board, which is one of the most conservative school boards in the district and is also this is his own school board, all but the president, the chairman there. And I think that guy's like a federal employee. I don't know. I looked at his background. He's got aviation. So I don't even know if he can sign this letter. The mayor of Keller, the mayor pro tem of Keller, multiple city councilmen in Keller, the president of Keller ISD, the school board president, signed this letter, who's a Republican. Every single member of the Keller ISD board signed this letter. These are the school board members. They're all Republicans. They're like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, can you not empower Democrats? The mayor of Colleyville, the mayor pro tem of Colleyville, all the city councilmen in Colleyville, Texas. This is a great conservative city in the heart of Giovanni's district. Grapevine Colleyville board members, the president, 3 school board members, Beau French, the Tarrant County GOP chair, a ton of business leaders, board members for the Tarrant Appraisal District, Rich Diott, who's very influential in that area, very respected, Rebecca Hardy, the president of Texans for Vaccine Choice, who lives there in Keller, Chris Putnam, who's a longtime activist and former mayor pro tem of Colleyville, Rick Barnes, who was just elected as the Tarrant County treasurer. So this is the guy who was just elected as the county treasurer, tax assessor collector countywide, lives in Keller in Giovanni's district, signed this letter, right? Julie McCarty, president of the True Texas Project. I mean, guys, I could continue to go. And Brandon Walton's tweeted this out. Texas Scorecard has an article where you can read this letter. Local officials urge Giovanni Capriglione to oppose Democrat-backed speaker candidate. That's the headline. Now, why do I talk about this? What does this letter have to do with anything? Because y'all are like, well, I don't live in Northeast Tarrant County. So 46 Republicans already said no Democrat chairs were selecting the speaker in caucus, right? And the contract with Texas Signers have said, here's a demand of a bunch of actual structural reforms. So one is just how you elect it, and one is the type of reforms that would start to structurally change the culture of the Texas House in a way that would significantly clip the wings of the bullies that try to enact their will on everybody else. Okay? So Giovanni Capriglione did not sign on to that. He then came out and pushed the Texas conservative commitment, which I covered on the show, which was this kind of approach and attempt to do 2 things. One, take away from a conversation around Democrats running the Texas House and helping select the speaker. They don't want to talk about that. And then they also don't want to talk about the Texas GOP priorities, which are bold and red and great and conservative. So they want to change the definition of what our priorities are so that they can have an easier time accomplishing them. And they watered down some of them. And then they also want to get the conversation away from Democrat chairs. Now, here's my encouragement to Republican legislators. There is a path to unity. There's a path to unity. Why don't we all get together and say Democrats are not selecting our next speaker and Democrats are not being given significant power and control over the Texas House? That's against Democrats. That's us all agreeing that we are not with Democrats. That's how you unite. If some of these guys dig in their heels, not only with Dade Phelan, but also just with the entire kind of uniparty regime that exists in the Texas House, they're asking for the tension that exists in the GOP to continue on. And so anybody who tells you as a conservative that you're the one contributing towards this is just refusing to acknowledge that only one side of this party divide is willing to team up with Democrats on a regular basis and voluntarily give them power. Giovanni is the first of probably many Republicans who are going to face increased pressure from people in their district to say, hey, we need to know where you stand between us and Democrats. If anything, if you were to synthesize this letter down to maybe one question is, Giovanni, we're after Democrats. Are you going to stand in the way when we try to take them out? Or are you going to be with us to try to take them out of power? Which one? That's the question. And that's the question for all these Republicans. So I'm very excited to see this. I'm super excited with the fact that so many elected officials and party leaders and business owners and donors and, candidates are all around this saying we need something better. And I think they're going to continue to say that across the state. And so that's why this local letter got so much traction when it came out, is because it was just a recognition of the unity that these type of issues have created in the party and the path forward for so many of these incumbent Republicans if they're willing to recognize what time it is. And that's really the question. So there's a lot going on across the state. I hope you've been able to dissect how a couple of these national stories and trends could affect Texas. If we were to pick up 4 or 5 more seats, that'd be a pretty awesome election night for us and would set us up better. But here's the key. We want to defeat these radical Democrats at the ballot, and we want to defeat their choice for speaker, and their choice for speaker is Dade Phelan. So if these people are telling you, if you're a donor or an activist or a Republican leader or whatever, we have to beat this Democrat. They're so crazy. Please, can we all unite and help this Republican? You're like, yeah. Oh, by the way, we all agree that that crazy Democrat that you're telling me would be a danger to our state. We're agreeing that their choice for speaker shouldn't be speaker, right? Because they would pick Dade Phelan. That's what they'd pick. And if Dade Phelan dropped out, they'd go with the next uniparty guy. And that could be the Dustin Burrows, Greg Bonning camp, who are probably lining up behind a Cody Harris or a Brad Buckley. I think they've dropped Cody, so I think they're more Brad Buckley at this point. But I think Dustin and Greg and these guys are trying to figure out how to get somebody like Brad set up and then get enough Democrats on board with him. And then there's the Drew Darby faction, and that's the Darby, Garen Van Dever faction, and they're trying to figure out if Democrats would go with them. But neither of them have enough in the caucus. And also, they're not sure if they can court Democrats, and Dade doesn't know if he has enough Republicans to actually go to the floor with him. Screw it, we're going to the floor anyways. Does he have 13 or 14 Republicans that'll link arms with him and just go commit a kamikaze mission to maybe hold power for 2 more years, but really hurt themselves politically? I don't know. These are the questions at hand, and I'll continue to talk more about speaker politics as we go forward. But this is the conversation happening, and grassroots activists and Republican leaders and elected officials and donors and all these people are all waking up to say, let's unite against Democrats. And their message to Republicans in the Texas House that are still loyal to not only Dade, but that kind of Burrows-Bonin regime is just, are y'all going to keep standing in front of these Democrats? Because we really want to try to take them down. Y'all need to stop trying to save them. That's it. May God bless you. And may God bless the great state of Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard. Real news for real Texans.